Good morning. Welcome to Mood Life. I'm Julie, and this is reading through the Bible in a year. We're reading through the Chronological Bible this year, and let me get these glasses on. Can't do it with one hand. Today we're going to be reading Numbers chapter 25 and Numbers chapter 31. Again, Chronological Bible, putting things in order chronologically the way they happen in history. Um, Again, I'm in a different location today and tomorrow also. So, no mug of the hour, unfortunately. Um, so, let's get started on the reading of the word today. It begins with this bit of information narration here. It's entitled Israel Sins in Moab. Despite the promise of military success over their political enemies, the Israelites soon find themselves defeated at their weakest point, that is, morally. At the urging of Balaam, the very man who has just blessed the Israelites, the Midianites deliberately and cunningly scheme to destroy Israel. The plan is to use the Midianite women to lure Israelite men first into bed and then into the obscene worship of a sensual idol. The Midianites correctly understand that such worship would be a death blow to this unique theocratic nation. It takes little time for the men of Israel to be attracted by the Midianite women in Moab, and equally little time to be seduced into worshiping Baal Peor, the fertility god which the women worship. Israel's seduction serves as a good example of how personal relationships, particularly wrong ones, can easily influence religious preferences, and why the Israelites are so severely restricted from mixing with foreigners. The impudence of one Israelite in flaunting a foreign woman before the congregation of God's people is met with a forceful response by Eleazar's son Phinehas. And God's own wrath against the idolatrous Israelites results in thousands dying of the plague for their transgressions. So, Numbers 25. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate and bowed down before these gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to Israel's judges, "Each of you must put to death those of your men who have joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor." Then an Israelite man brought to his family a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through both of them, through the Israelite and into the woman's body. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped. But those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord said to Moses, "Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, for he was as zealous as I am for my honor among them, so that in my zeal I did not put an end to them. Therefore tell him I am making covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites." The name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, the leader of a Simeonite family. And the name of the Midianite woman who was put to death was Cosbi, daughter of Zur, a tribal chief of a Midianite family. The Lord said to Moses, "Treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them, because they treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the affair of Peor and their sister Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite leader, the woman who was killed when the plague came as a result of Peor. Now there's a little narration entitled Destruction of the Midianites. God is clearly incensed by the insidious moral attack brought against his people by the Midianites, but he is also incensed by the Israelites themselves. Because of their willful disobedience and pursuant to his promise, he sends a plague which claims the 24,000 lives. Having dealt with the Israelites, God then confronts the Midianites. That God should punish the Midianites for their great wickedness is understandable, but the account of that punishment is difficult for some to accept. So now we go to Numbers 31. The Lord said to Moses, "Take vengeance on the Midianites for the Israelites. After that, you will be gathered to your people." So Moses said to the people, "Arm some of your men to go to war against the Midianites, and to carry out the Lord's vengeance on them. Send into battle 1,000 men from each of the tribes of Israel." So 12,000 men armed for battle, 1,000 from each tribe, were supplied from the clans of Israel. Moses sent them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, along with Phinehas son of Eleazar the priest, who took with him articles from the sanctuary and the trumpets for signaling. They fought against Midian, as the Lord commanded Moses, and killed every man. Among their victims were Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with a sword. The Israelites captured the Midianite women and children, and took all the Midianite herds, flocks, and goods as plunder. They burned all the towns where the Midianites had settled, as well as all their camps. They took all the plunder and spoils, including the people and animals, and brought the captives, spoils, and plunder to Moses and Eleazar the priest and the Israelite assembly at their camp on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands of commanders of hundreds. The commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds who returned from the battle. Have you allowed all the women to live? He asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and were the means of turning the Israelites away from the Lord in what happened at Peor, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. Now kill all the boys, and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. All of you who have killed anyone or touched anyone who was killed must stay outside the camp 7 days. On the 3rd and 7th days you must purify yourselves and your captives. Purify every garment as well as everything made of leather, goat hair, or wood. Then Eleazar the priest said to the soldiers who had gone into battle, "This is the requirement of the law that the Lord gave Moses. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, lead, and anything else that can withstand fire must be put through the fire, and then it will be clean. But it must also be purified with the water of cleansing. And whatever cannot withstand fire must be put through that water. On the 7th day wash your clothes, and you will be clean. Then you may come up into camp." The Lord said to Moses, "You and Eleazar the priest and the family heads of the community are to count all the people and animals that were captured. Divide the spoils between the soldiers who took part in the battle and the rest of the community. From the soldiers who fought in the battle, set apart as tribute for the Lord 1 out of every 500, whether persons, cattle, donkeys, sheep, or goats. Take this tribute from their half share and give it to Eleazar the priest as the Lord's part. From the Israelites' half, select 1 out of every 50, whether persons, cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, or other animals. Give them to the Levites, who are responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle." So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The plunder remaining from the spoils that the soldiers took was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 women who had never slept with a man. The half share of those who fought in the battle was 337,500 sheep, 37 of which the tribute for the Lord was 675, 36,000 cattle, of which the tribute for the Lord was 72, 30,500 donkeys, of which the tribute for the Lord was 61, and 16,000 people, of which the tribute for the Lord was 32. Moses gave the tribute to Eleazar the priest as the Lord's part, as the Lord commanded Moses. The half belonging to the Israelites, which Moses set apart from that of the fighting men, the community's half, was 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. From the Israelites' half, Moses selected one out of every 50 persons and animals, as the Lord commanded him, and gave them to the Levites, who were responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle. Then the officers who were over the units of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, went to Moses and said to him, "Your servants have counted the soldiers under your command, and not one is missing. So we have brought as an offering to the Lord the gold articles each of us acquired, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord." Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted from them the gold, all the crafted articles, all the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds that Moses and Eleazar presented as a gift to the Lord, weighed 16,750 shekels. Each soldier had taken plunder for himself. Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. Now there's a commentary here to finish up today's reading. One might like to believe that the orders to kill were those of Moses acting on his own, but there is every reason to believe that Moses acted at God's direction. The question then arises, how can a loving God either direct or condone such action? The answer is undoubtedly very complex. As for the women, it was they who turned the Israelites away from the Lord at Peor. As for the young boys, perhaps they would have presented a continuing threat to Israel as they grew into manhood. Such a threat will indeed be confirmed some years later when Midianites from other areas engage in war against Israel. The young girls, on the other hand, were to be taken as slaves into the homes of the Israelites, where they would be at least spared inevitable, or there, where where they would at least be spared inevitable spiritual enslavement or the sensuous worship of Baal Peor. There is no suggestion that Moses meant for the Israelites to take them as wives or concubines. But even these possible explanations are not easy to accept. In order to appreciate more fully God's actions, it's necessary to understand the level of moral consciousness of the times. Among the nations of this era, wars of revenge involving total destruction or confiscation of property, and either extermination or enslavement of men, women, and children are commonplace and expected. Okay, so that's among the nations of this era. All of that is commonplace and expected. That is doubtless why there is no hint that the Israelites felt the slightest discomfort in carrying out Moses' orders. In raising the moral consciousness of a first nation and then the world, God must take his people as he finds them and introduce principles of righteousness within a moral framework with which the people can identify. The fact that the women and children were saved from death initially may indicate that an exception was made to the customary practices of such a war of revenge. If so, the reason for the exception becomes important. Quite possibly the men of Israel were still enticed by the Midianite women and did not understand the continuing moral threat which the women posed. Viewed in that light, Moses' actions take on takes on greatly increased respectability. It also appears that God is teaching a vitally important lesson about the attitude which his people must have regarding the various human lusts which war against the soul. Even the weakest of lusts, perhaps represented here by the women and the young boys, must be resisted as completely and early as possible in order to prevent their success in moments of moral vulnerability. The account of the Midianites' destruction concludes with various directions concerning the booty that was taken in the conquest. And even from this part of the account, profitable lessons can be learned, particularly about the rewards accruing to those who wage war against sin. Okay, so that ends our reading for today for the Word of God. Thank you so much for joining me here on Mahood Life, and I hope that you will join me again tomorrow. Have a blessed day.